Let's get a little up close and personal with this thing. Take a look. Of course, you always want to wear gloves. I don't want to put fingerprints all over this thing, so... What? Yeah, I'm just kidding. Who cares? Alright, we're looking close at that dial. It really is something. Obviously, the tricolor, as the title of the video does, and you can see for yourself. Let's get some of the measurements out of the way. I'll probably get some calipers, but for the meantime, this should do it. Looks like it's coming in right at about 42, just like it's described. And of course, here's the more key measurement, is that lug to lug, which is kind of what makes this a do or do not with this watch, in my opinion. And it looks like it comes in right at about 50 millimeters. Let's describe the dial just a little bit. The dial itself is basically a silver dial, but it kind of has an off-white just a little eggshell or almost champagne on the main, and with that black minute track to give it some contrast. All the indices and the hands are rhodium plated, so they're very shiny. And then those 3 sub-dials are finished a little differently, almost like a brush on their outer ring and then concentric circles on the inner ring, which really gives it a difference in finish from the rest of the dial, which helps it stand out. Let's give this thing a run. It's a really satisfying click on the start of the second hand when you activate the chronograph, which is nice. I'm trying to focus in here. You can see a really smooth sweep of that of the second hand, thanks to that 36,000 vibrations per hour. The reset is very sharp as well, just like the start, which is nice. Let's look at the sides of this case. As you can see, the top of the lugs are brushed, and then there's a slight chamfer on the edge that's polished, leading down to the sides of the case, which is very polished as well, kind of leaning it to a slightly dressy look. But the back of this watch shows the real star of the show, that El Primero movement. As I'm sure you know, in the 60s, there was a bit of a chronograph race to make the first integrated automatic chronograph movement, where it's not modular and added onto an existing movement. Seiko had one they were working on, Heuer and Zenith. And arguably, a lot of people argue that the Zenith was first because they had their press conference first unveiling the thing. But, you know, it looks like Seiko actually beat them to market a little bit. But for sure, nonetheless, this is the only one that's still in production. And it's the only one that was the high beat, 36,000 vibrations per hour. And the pushers are very piston-like. They are not screw-down pushers, although the watch does boast 100 meters of water resistance. Not that I would ever take it swimming, but it is good to know that if you're washing your hands and water gets on the watch, you don't have to panic and go run for a hair dryer. And if you see, there's a nice box crystal that stands proudly on top of the case, kind of adding a little bit to its appeal. This watch has a lot of subtleness to it, like those lugs, how they taper back in at the ends, and that box crystal and the polished surfaces and a little brushed on the top. And there's a lot of subtle angles on this watch that really give it some class. An interesting fun fact about the El Primero movement is that after the quartz crisis in the late 70s and early 80s, which almost put the Swiss watch making business out of business, Rolex came back around and wanted to do an automatic chronograph, their Daytona. Basically, in the past, with the really popular ones from the 60s and such, they're a little bit smaller, but they're manual wind movements. So when they needed an automatic chronograph, who did they go to? They went to Zenith and used the El Primero. They had Zenith altered a little bit. The beats per hour were lowered to 28.8, and a couple of the other components were also switched out. So if you buy a Rolex Daytona that came out from 1988 to basically 2000, it's got the same movement in it. All right, here's a wrist shot. I have a flat 7-inch wrist. It's kind of square. And of course, it's time for the obligatory steering wheel shot. It's about time.